Hey everybody. In today's lesson, we're going to be moving on to the next part of the Math IA rubric, which is part 4, and this is Criterion D, which is called Reflection. Similar to partial engagement, this is worth 3 of the 20 total points. So A and B are each worth 4, and C and D are each worth 3. And then just like I did before in all the other videos, I'm going to go through sort of officially what the rubric says in terms of the number of points here. So for 0 points, you don't manage to pull off anything below this. Hopefully that won't happen. For 1 point, there's evidence of limited reflection. For 2 points, there's evidence of meaningful reflection. And for 3 points, there's substantial evidence of critical reflection. Similar to Criterion C, the reflection criterion can feel a little bit more subjective than A or B, and some find it difficult to distinguish between reflection and personal engagement, but IB gives us some good advice, and I have some advice for us as well. Another thing I want to mention here, and I don't remember whether or not I said it in the personal engagement video, but I think that in the rubric, the use of the word evidence is interesting. And I think that, in my opinion, one of the things that that word evidence means, is one, there has to be evidence. It has to be something that's in your paper. We have to see it. The second thing is, I feel like when you do your exploration, remember there's you doing the exploration, and then there's you writing the IA, writing the exploration. And so having evidence of something in the writing means that there must have been evidence of that in your exploration. Like, it's hard to write about reflection if you didn't reflect during the process. So it's important to remember that this isn't something that you just like tack on at the end. You need to be reflecting and thinking about what reflection means as you're carrying out your exploration in the first place, so that you can write about it when you get around to the writing. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to try and talk about the difference between personal engagement and reflection. I'll be referring sometimes to personal engagement as PE in this slide just to make it take up less space. So many students and even teachers, I'll be honest, I had difficulty with this sometimes, find it difficult to differentiate between personal engagement and reflection. It's hard to do one of them and not the other, but you can. We don't really want to. You really want to do both of them, but it's a little bit hard to do them, to do one and not the other. But here's some ideas that might help you to keep the two straight in your head. And I'm kind of trying to color code these blue and red, just to sort of visually see the difference. So if personal engagement is about the choices that you make in the exploration, if personal engagement is about you going like, I think this is the way that I want to carry this out and move the thing forward, then reflection is about how much you react to or reflect on the result of those choices. So your personal engagement is going to be the thing that gets you to sort of like make a decision about what to do. Reflection is about you saying, this is what happened when I did that. What do I do with that information? How successful was that? What should I do next? Was this a good choice? Would I have done this again? So personal engagement is a little bit about the initial choices that you make, and reflection is about, wow, what happened in this math, and what am I going to do with what happened? You could, and just to give you maybe a little bit of sense of this, you could have a paper that has really great personal engagement and poor reflection by finding a variety of interesting ways to approach your topic, but never really stopping to determine how successful those approaches were or how well you were achieving your aim. Remember that your paper really needs to be built around that aim. It should always be progressing toward the aim. So if you're always just coming up with like neat other approaches, but never really stopping to think about how successful any of these approaches were, or what you learned from those approaches, you have good personal engagement, but you have poor reflection. On the flip side, you could have a paper that has poor personal engagement, but good reflection, by carrying out a really kind of textbook, like humdrum exploration, no real creative engagement on your part, but at least you regularly stopped to take time to assess how successful your exploration had been so far. So reflection is a little bit more about self-assessment and check-in, whereas personal engagement is about the choices that you're making as you move through the exploration. So I hope that helps to make sense of some of this difference. If you've still got questions about them, please ask that. Or if you see something in like a paper that someone else writes, or in one of the mini I's that I write, and you're wondering like, this seems like personal engagement, this seems a little bit more like reflection, let me know, and I'll see if I can help you to make sense of that difference. So some of the key ideas on reflection. So first I want to start with some thoughts from the IB guide. The reflection criterion assesses how the student reviews, analyzes, and evaluates the exploration. And hopefully you've sort of heard me using some of those words and discussing that in the previous slide. But reflection is really about your checking in with the process of your exploration, with the math that you're doing. And this is a really, really important one. Reflection can be seen in the conclusion to an exploration. So this is actually interesting. I did a weird thing here. The IB guide says, like word for word, they use the red word. Although reflection may be seen in the conclusion of the exploration, it may also be found throughout the exploration. I don't like using the word may. I feel like IB really should have just used the word should. Reflection should be found throughout the exploration. They kind of put in their guide like, oh, it's okay if it's just in the conclusion. It's just got to be really, really good. It's like, all right, I mean, I guess you could. But reflection is really something that we should be doing throughout processes that we do. Usually we don't think nothing of what we're doing, and then at the very, very end, like, oh no, what did I do? It's better that we be in the habit of consistently and throughout reflecting on an exploration. So yeah, this is sort of my thought on that. So the key words in the rubric levels were limited reflection at level 1, meaningful reflection at level 2, and substantial evidence of critical reflection in level 3. So the next thing I'm going to do in this video is look at what those words mean using the language directly from the IB guide. So now that we've hopefully got a sense of what reflection is and where it's supposed to be happening in our exploration, now we can get into how do we achieve different levels of reflection. So understanding these levels. For level 1, limited reflection. The IB guide is really clear. It basically means that all you were doing is describing your results. And to be really clear, describing results is not bad, but you'll need to do more than that for the higher levels. So for instance, if you gathered some data and then you put a table of the data in your exploration, and then you didn't describe that data at all, or if you came up with an equation that models that thing and you're like, yay, I found my equation. Conclusion, this was kind of hard, but I figured it out. There's no reflection there. So if instead you got a bunch of data and you came up with an equation, and then you took a sentence or two, you took some time to sort of describe like, like, here's this equation, this is what this means, this is how you would use this. You're showing at least limited reflection. You're describing what the result was that you got. To move up to the next level, meaningful reflection, there isn't like a formulaic way to get meaningful reflection. The guide gives some examples, some ways that you can show meaningful reflection. Meaningful reflection, in a lot of ways, means that it has meaning. It's reflection that has a deeper meaning. So let's look at what some of the examples that IB says. One of them, linking to the aims of the exploration. So if you had some results and then you describe them and you're like, oh, this really helps us progress toward the aim. It did such and such, but we still need to do such and such. That's meaningful reflection because you're linking back to the aim. You're linking back to what you were trying to do in the beginning. Commenting on what you've learned. Remember that this IA, this exploration, is not just you sharing results with another person, it's also you sharing what your learning process was. So commenting on what you've learned through the process. I'm trying to think about how to say the next thing that I want to say. I sometimes see students that will make a comment about what they've learned, and it's a real quick side comment. I'm not saying you need to have like a whole paragraph about it, but it's nice if this is, this is called meaningful reflection. It's nice if this is meaningful. And so if you've actually learned something, if you can spend like a full sentence on the thing that you learned and how that helped you to grow, or what you can do mathematically now, or how that's going to help you next, those are good. That's a good thing. The next one, considering some limitation or limitations of your work. So meaningful reflection might be you recognizing, hey, I got to this point, but I didn't quite hit this. Like, I recognize I've done this, but I haven't done this. And sometimes that means you're going to do that next. And sometimes that means, that's really beyond my mathematical ability. Either one of those is kind of okay, but you meaningfully reflecting and talking about a place where your work didn't quite complete what you needed to do, that can be meaningful reflection. By the way, you don't need to do all of these things. So it's not like you have to look at your work and go like, oh no, there's no limitations on my work. It's okay if you're only doing some of these. It's okay if you do all of them. You want to reflect in the ways that are, wait for it, meaningful in the exploration that you're doing. Another way to show meaningful reflection would be comparing different mathematical approaches. So if there were a couple of different approaches and you did more than one of them, okay. If there were a couple of different approaches and you just did one of them, but there was a reason that you did only one of them, that's okay. You could share what those are. Note, and this is something I mentioned earlier in the video, but I'm going to mention it again here. These achievement levels all use the phrase evidence of. It's a subtle difference, but my interpretation is that personal engagement and reflection are both things that you need to do as you are exploring so that you can include evidence of that when you write. So now, reaching for the top, level 3. So if you want to get to level 3, it can feel like a big step. What do you need to do to achieve it? So sorry this all came up all at once, but critical reflection. Critical reflection, the IB guide says, is reflection that is crucial, deciding, or deeply insightful. So I interpret crucial to mean you have to do it. So this is reflection that, must be said. Like, it's clear, it's something that you really, really have to get into. Deciding and deeply insightful are ones that I often focus on a little bit more. I consider deciding reflection to be you reflected on results and made a decision about what to do next and how to move forward. Deeply insightful just means that you really recognized, I'm really digging into what's happening here and recognizing something important, crucial about what this result is. The reflection, critical reflection, often develops your whole exploration by addressing what the results are and what their impact is on your understanding of the topic. So it's like, this is reflection that is not just, oh, this is neat, I noticed this. This is like, whoa, I noticed this thing, this means such and such. That means I should be doing this next. And that helps me to understand that this is how I should be approaching this next part and my understanding of math in general. It's a really, really, it's one of those things that feels good to write. It feels good to recognize that you've done that. And so, yes, this is you reaching for higher points in the rubric and scoring better, but it also just feels good to be doing a paper and recognize that you're reaching that level. So a few ways of showing that are considering what comes next in the exploration. So recognizing, all right, so I've done this thing, and I think this is what this means, and so now I need to do this. That's deciding, right? That's you moving forward. Discussing the implications of your results. So getting some result and talking about, this is what this means. This is the deeper meaning of this thing, and this is how I'm going to use it. Discussing the strengths and weaknesses of different approaches. So recognizing there may be a weakness to something that you did. There may have been something that ended up being really, really strong. And you might recognize, wow, this method is way more powerful than I realized that it was. And then another one, remember, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just the things that were mentioned in the IB guide. Another way to show critical reflection is to consider different perspectives. And those could either be historical perspectives, those could be cultural perspectives, or those could be the perspectives of different mathematicians or different schools of thought within mathematics in terms of how to solve problems. So there are certainly other ways of showing critical reflection, but these are some of them. Now, this next part is really, really important, okay? Because the rubric doesn't say for level 3 that you have to have evidence of critical reflection. You need substantial evidence of critical reflection. So the guide says critical reflection, to be substantial, must be present throughout the exploration, which means you've got to have multiple instances of this critical reflection. And then they say this other bit, which is, I mean, I guess it's nice. If it only appears at the end of the exploration, not recommended. Those are my words, I put that in. It must be high quality and show how it developed the exploration. So if you really, really, really want to put a reflection section at the end, okay, it better be really good, and you need to talk in that reflection section about how you developed the exploration. In other words, how did it get you from part 1 to part 2? How did it get you from section 2 to section 3? How did it really develop the IA as you were going along? Which makes me wonder, if it was happening all along, why did you wait till the end to say it? Why not mention those things as you're going through the exploration? Why not put that, a little bit of that at the end of each section? And then if you really want a reflection section at the end, fine, make that a summary of the things that you said earlier. So, critical reflection, and I don't know if I'm going to say this in the next slide or not, so I'm going to mention it here. Limited reflection isn't bad. Describing your results isn't bad. Meaningful reflection, doing the things that I said meaningful, aren't bad. Those are all good. It's okay to have a mix of all of these different types of reflection. But for level 3, you need to have substantial evidence, multiple instances of critical reflection, of this level of reflection. So do all of them, have a good variety, and make sure that it's showing up throughout your exploration. So as a quick review, remember that the key to reflection is that it is about how you assess the mathematics and whether you've been successful or not on your exploration. This reminds us again of how important it is to remember our aim throughout the exploration. Okay. This is what I said before. I thought I put this in here. It's okay to have a variety of levels of reflection in your work. Just because it's limited reflection, describing your results, only level 1, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Just means if that's all you did, you're going to be stuck at level 1. Remember also that meaningful reflection isn't bad. You should do this for sure, but you need to do more than that to go above level 2. To reach the highest level, you have to have substantial evidence of critical reflection. And so my advice to you is that you reflect throughout the exploration process. That way you can provide lots of evidence of it when you finally sit down to write the actual paper. So that's the end of this video. That's what I had to say about reflection. I hope that all made sense, that you were able to sort of make clear in your mind the difference between personal engagement and reflection, and that within reflection you've got a sense of what the different levels are and how you'll get to the highest levels of that. I think as a final comment here, I will say, and I mentioned it earlier in the video, personal engagement and reflection are really satisfying to do. I mean, it's really satisfying to get the math right also, but it's satisfying to go, dang, not only did I get the math right, but I get what that means. I get how to use that. And so I really hope that hearing about this will encourage you to sort of like start early on an exploration, and make it something that's meaningful to you, and that you'll feel really, really good about when you finish it. That's my dream. That's my hope for all of you as you work through this. So yeah, as always, if you've got questions, let me know. And I wish you best of luck as you keep working on being mathematical writers.